You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu, your host, and today we are discussing the top 5 offenses that I have picked in the NFL. This is my personal list, one that it's interesting because I feel like there's only really a handful of teams you can really argue this. I didn't have too much thought really need to go into all of these because a few of them I was like, they have to be on this list. And there was only about a couple that I really debated on here, and I'll let you guys decide that as I go through. But without further ado, we will start the top 5 list. We go from 5 to 1 here on the Greeks Gridiron. So coming in at number 5, a very high-powered, up-and-coming offense, and one that I expect to get even better as we go into this next season. I have none other than the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills, why are they sitting at number 5? Why are they not higher? The biggest issue I have with them is their run game. It did get exposed, in my opinion, during their playoff run this past season. When it came down to it, they just could not run the football. It was literally the Josh Allen show, and I understand that, the NFL has evolved into a passing league, but you still need to have a solid running game to lean back on, and in my opinion, just when it came down to it, into the playoffs, they just felt like they relied too heavily on Josh Allen's arm, especially in that loss against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, where it became very apparent to me that it was going to be necessary for the Buffalo Bills to figure out whether it meant, restructuring their offensive line, cashing in on a new running back or something like that, whatever it may be. They didn't do a whole bunch in the offseason to address that. They did a lot to fill other holes on the team. The running game is something that I'm just going to have to look for improvements for and see, is it any better this year? Is the offensive line blocking better? Is Devin Singletary, making those runs, hitting those holes that he needs to do to keep this team balanced and not just relying on Josh Allen's arm 40 to 50 times a game? We'll have to see. But overall, the numbers from last year don't lie. 4,700 passing yards, 40 touchdowns. They still had 1,700 rushing yards, 16 rushing TDs. So it's not like they were terrible. It's just a matter of, this is probably the most unbalanced team of the 5 on this list, in my opinion, and that's why I have them sitting here down at the bottom of the list of this top 5. Now, coming in at number 4, this was a team that I actually didn't expect to have on this list, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, damn, this could really be a legitimate threatening offense in the league, and I have the Minnesota Vikings sitting in at number 4. Now, looking at their numbers from this past year, 4,265 yards, 35 passing touchdowns. That's all passing numbers right there. Then another 2,283 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns on the ground as well. So this is already a very formidable unit. The offensive line was probably the biggest point of issue when it came to anything related to the Minnesota Vikings offense. And they went after it aggressively in the draft, taking in Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis during the first and third rounds respectively. So they helped bolster the offensive line. Then on top of that, you think about who they have. Kirk Cousins, who has been a very solid quarterback his entire career. Then you have Dalvin Cook, of course, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. And if you get production from anybody else in the receiving game at the tight end spot or another wide receiver, this is already a 4-headed monster between the quarterback and the 3 skill position players I just listed right there. I only expect things to get better with that offensive line being improved. I'm very excited to see how it goes down over there in Minnesota. But in my opinion, when it comes to the very end of the final, week 18 now that we're going into because of the extended season now, when it comes down to week 18, I expect this team to be right at the top of the list. Now, going into number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers, who are looking at 4,299 passing yards. They're also looking at 48 touchdowns. Then they were coming off of a season with 2,118 rushing yards and 16 total rushing touchdowns. Now, number 3, Green Bay Packers, I have them slipped right above the Minnesota Vikings here. This is one that I could almost argue is interchangeable because the more I look at it, the more I realize that Minnesota's offense is molded to keep pace, and the Green Bay Packers, they lost Corey Lindsey at the center position. Obviously, the rift that we've had with Rodgers and Green Bay has been very apparent this entire offseason as well. But They were able to bring back Aaron Jones, which a lot of people did not expect them to be able to do. Randall Cobb is there now, which is somebody that Aaron Rodgers has apparently wanted to be on this team since he got let go a few years ago by Green Bay. The Packers also, which it didn't really get talked about enough. Granted, they didn't take a first-round receiver. They did take Amari Rodgers later in the draft, who could pose a threat if him and Aaron Rodgers get a good connection going there. And then on top of that, Devin Funchess, who didn't even get to really play for them last year at all, he'll be coming back into the fold as well as a receiver for the group. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential with the receiving core on top of Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones with what they've already been doing in Green Bay. And the way I see it is Aaron Rodgers put up an MVP performance just this past season because of a chip on his shoulder with Jordan Love being drafted. Now I can only imagine how he's going to do it if this is potentially his last season in Green Bay, if he opts to be traded going into next season. We'll get to that when we get to that, but I mean, there's nothing really pointing in any direction that leads me to believe that there's no reason Aaron Rodgers isn't back in the MVP conversation at the same point that he was going into weeks 14, 15, 16 last year, where he was leading or was the front runner, period. Now, coming in at number 2, and I'm very curious to see what fans of this team will think, and I'm very curious to see who thinks is coming up after them as well. I have the Kansas City Chiefs sitting as the number 2 offense in the league. Now, why am I putting them only at number 2? Some people would argue if you look at what they have, they are the best offense in the league. You have Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill. The offensive line is being reworked over there in Kansas City. The process is already going on. They made a big free agent signing in Joe Thuney, draft picks, there's a whole reworking of that offensive line over there. Eric Fisher is gone. Now we have to see if this offensive line can mesh well together and allow Patrick Mahomes the time to do his thing. We saw in the Super Bowl, he was hitting throws that were being dropped, and he didn't even have an offensive line protecting him the entire game. The dude ran I think it was 500 or something yards just running away from defenders throughout the entire game. Some ridiculous number like that. Everything starts with the offensive line, especially when it comes to, being able to extend any type of play. It's one thing that Patrick Mahomes can make these big, crazy plays when he's on the move, but it's another when he's being required to take take a little bit longer in the pocket, but doesn't have that actual time because he's not being protected. So that's where everything's really going to kind of boil down for Kansas City. They have the skill position players. They have the quarterback. If Allaire makes a sophomore leap, which he was looking pretty good early on in the year, and then he kind of tapered off a little bit, with that reworked offensive line, I mean, this team is scary. There's no reason to believe that they can't be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl again. But I think with the whole reworking of the offensive line, it could be a little bit questionable as to how things go out. It's not just plug and play. The offensive lines need to play together, and they need to play together well for things to run smoothly on an offense. So outside from that, their one question mark is this retooled offensive line going to work? I think they are the second most impressive offense going into this year. And then coming in at number 1, this was not really a debate for me, just how I watched them steamroll the competition as the weeks went on towards the end of last season. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Tom Brady-led offense. The entire offense from last year has returned from, first stringers to even some second stringers that were, replacing guys that were injured down the stretch there. There is so much potential between Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller, Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, and I mean, whoever else ends up emerging from this offense, if anyone even has the opportunity to, if those top 6 guys are moving out of the way for anybody. But I mean, the offensive line was retooled last season, and it ended up working out really well for Tampa Bay. Tom Brady was protected very well, and especially when we got past that Week 12 loss to Kansas City, I mean, the Tampa Bay offense just seemed to have figured it out. They scored no less than 31 points every single playoff game that they were in last year. I mean, they finished the year so strong, looking so good, and I have no reason to believe otherwise that they, at the end of this season, will not be the number 1 team. Now, I would like to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Feel free to let me know, argue your points, say what you got to say. But this is my top 5 offenses. I appreciate you all for watching. I'll catch you guys with another video later this week. Have a good rest of your day.